Friday. Hopefully start the budget conference as early as next week. Probably not on Monday, but maybe Tuesday or Wednesday would be the kickoff on that. So from a budget standpoint, there's a lot left undone from a transit standpoint. Number one, the House and Senate budget are miles apart on the couple of transit lines, budget line items in the budget. They're off by almost $300 million. We have been told the Senate is way below where the House is. We've been told that was an internal error that will be fixed in one of the initial budget passes, so hopefully that will be fixed pretty quick. Also not included in the Senate budget, which we've been told should be corrected, is the Transportation Disadvantaged Innovative Service Grant of $6 billion is not included right now in the Senate budget. That's important to us because we use that for the LACESHIP program and a couple other programs as well. So we believe that we'll be there, but they are miles apart right now on pure numbers. I think once we get in the budget conference, that will kind of work itself out. And hopefully I should have good news to report to you all at our June meeting. I'm going to bring up a couple of bills. One we've been working on probably since we've represented you all. I'm happy to report that the Rule 1490 issue, for those of you, just a quick refresher, the Rule 1490, the administrative code with the state, basically says that if PSTA spends $1 on like a TNC or a non-transit provider that's coming in to provide services for the organization, the moment we spend $1 of state dollars on them, they are then treated as if they're a bus and have to meet all the safety requirements and so on, as if they're a bus. I'm happy to report that has finally been changed. It passed in House Bill 1525. The good news is we believe the governor will sign that. We've already talked to his team early on to make sure they have no concerns with that. That will give Brad and the team a lot more flexibility from a spending standpoint as it relates to work with TNCs, Uber, Lyft, taxis, other organizations, as it relates to providing services on behalf of PSTA. The other thing that it did as well, there was a training requirement last year that was also hindering us to work with third-party vendors, to work with agencies for persons with disability trips. That has also been fixed, so that, again, that will help us from a flexibility standpoint to make sure that that's not going to prevent our third-party providers from coming in and providing some of these additional trips. We're tracking a sovereign immunity bill that would have had a pretty big impact on us, I think, from an insurance standpoint, called Suits Against Government. That bill did not make it to the finish line. It was going to raise the additional caps on sovereign immunity for local governments. That went away, by the way, which was good. Let me spend just a minute on, I know a lot of you, especially the local government folks that are sitting around the table, House Bill 1221 in 1694, Senate Bill 1694, relating to tourist development tax dollars and local discretionary sales tax. The good news is those bills did not pass and those bills did not make it to the finish line. And based upon the resolution that was passed on Friday evening, those bills can no longer be taken up. The bad news is 1221, which is the House bill, which included a bunch of language on TDT. It also included the discretionary sales tax language as well, was included in the House tax package, which is 7033. That bill is still alive. So just know, anybody talking about TDT, that language is still out there. I think there's 4 different options the House and Senate could possibly go with TDT during extended session. Number one, which is probably the one that from a local government standpoint, we probably have the most concern about, that would be the property tax swap. In House Bill 1221, it basically allowed local governments the ability to spend tourist development tax dollars on any general fund issue, and specifically that would require them to transfer any TDT collections to offset property taxes. I do not think the Senate has any interest in going there. The House last week announced a select committee in short term. So the good news is I don't think the property tax swap for TDT will make it during special session, and more importantly, will hopefully not be brought up in the future as well. The language in there will also potentially still have any TDT tax or local discretionary sales tax to go to voters by January 1st of 20. That does not directly impact PSTA, by the way, but I know it impacts a lot of the local government sitting around the table. Again, I don't think they're gonna do a lot of policy through the tax package, so I don't think that potentially would make it to the finish line as well. Third option is capping that 40% of all dollars collected by that local government from a TDT standpoint would have to go potentially to be used for the initial purpose of marketing that region. And then, it'd be the cap at 40% of total funds collected, or $50 million total. That doesn't really probably impact the Tampa Bay folks a whole lot. That would be really directed more at Orlando potentially. That's an option. Then option number 4 is nothing, nothing could happen. So my guess is option 3 or 4, the ones either the cap and or nothing happens, probably is what's ultimately going to happen on the on TDT probably moving forward. So let me just remind everybody, if you go back and look at kind of our initial, what we wanted to accomplish this session, and I think we did that on the 2 trips we've done, and more importantly, by the fact that we, PSTA was not, front and center this year in a lot of the discussions in Tallahassee, which is great. Number 1, we want to talk about, low administration overhead costs. If you go back to one of the House bills that passed last year, one of the transportation bills, they really wanted to cap the amount of administrative funds being used by transit agencies. We're basically half the statewide average, by the way, which is fantastic. We talked about how we reduced taxes in this year's budget. We talked about expenses are lower year over year. We talked about our partnerships with Lyft, Uber, and other organizations, and how we've really done a good job from, not only privatizing, but partnering with different organizations to, I think, really stretch our budget further. And then last, we talked, obviously, what we've done from a hurricane recovery effort standpoint as well. So I just want to mention this one final time, because that was a key talking point for us kind of throughout session as we talked to legislators just about PSTA in general. So Brad, what did I miss? I think those were the big points we've been talking about. Anything that you wanted to bring up, either from the association standpoint or anything that I may have missed in my update?
Thank you, Ron. That covered a lot. The one issue that I know has come up on the state association calls, and maybe it's part of that tax package that you talked about, the tourist development tax, was a provision that I think any sales tax measure would have to go back to the voters like every 8 years or 10, something like that.
Yeah, that's the TDT. Then also in the other portion of that was the discretionary sales tax. That the discretionary sales tax and or TDT would have to go to the ballot by January 1st of 2033, and would have to be put back on the ballot every 8 years after. There was some additional language that was put in there, though. If you were going to bond either the TDT and or the discretionary sales tax, you would have the ability to extend it longer than 8 years, up to 20 or 30 years, as long as you were telling the voters that you were bonding it, and there would be a bond debt involved in using taxpayer dollars to pay that off.
And that is what still is alive.
Technically, it's still alive, but I don't think they're going to do that through the tax package. I'm pretty confident that will not pass.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you. Thank you for being real time on it.
Yeah. Did you have any other comments about the rest of what he talked about?
No, I agree with him. I think our trips to Tallahassee this year, and our general focus on sort of communicating all of the things that PSTA has always done to try to be efficient, as he said, and our very, very important response during the hurricanes, I think helped our stay out of the bullseye in a good way, and that was obvious with not only legislators that were directly putting us in the bullseye last year, but other legislators noticed it as well. They all noticed it, and thanks to Ron for sort of helping us carve that, get that message to them. Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure.
All right.
Madam Chair and members, I think we believe what's gonna happen is allocation should be done later this week. It's our budget conference, hopefully next week, fingers crossed. Try to get done by the end of the month. I think once we get going in Tallahassee, it should be a relatively quick process. I think we can be done within 7 to 10 days, hopefully. So I'll obviously keep Brad, and Brad can keep you and the board updated on, kind of where we are from a transit standpoint, but I suspect when we come back in June, we should have relatively good news from
No,
Questions?
no, I'm good. Ron, that was quite a lot. But again, I do agree with Brad in regards to the trip. I enjoyed it. I know people keep saying, really, you were in Tallahassee and you enjoyed it, but I really did. You know, Ron was very thorough in making sure that we saw who we needed to see, and those that we actually did visit were very helpful in ensuring PSTA that we were in a good place. So, you know, and again, I credit that to our partnership that we have with Mr. Pierce. But other than that, thank you for the report. I'm looking forward to finally having the session closed. There are some appropriations that I was following myself, don't know where they are, but we're gonna be hopeful. But I know that all of us are feeling a budget squeeze right now. Chair.
Right, thank you, Ron, that was a great update, and I hope that you're able to go home soon and take a break, well deserved.
awesome. Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
All right, thanks.
Okay, thanks, everybody.
Take care.
Next, we'll have our federal legislative update with Harry Glenn. Hi, Harry.
Good morning. Hope everybody's doing well. I guess like Ron, we had a pretty busy federal couple of days here. Brad and Debbie, it was nice to have Debbie in Washington last week. Ron and Debbie were up here last week. We had I think, Brad, one of our most effective Washington trips that you made. We had an opportunity to go over to the Federal Transit Administration and meet with the new deputy administrator in his first couple of days on the job. Tariq Bokhari just came off the Charlotte City Council to accept the deputy position over at FTA. So right now he's running FTA until they can confirm Mark Molinaro as new administrator. But we had a really good meeting over at FTA and with some folks in there from the U.S. Department of Transportation. Brought them up to speed on, educated them on PSTA and the good work that you're doing. Talked about some of the innovative programming. They were really excited to hear that you're a very cost-effective agency, that you were able to bring the Sunrunner project in under budget and ahead of schedule, and able to use those additional resources to expand out to another station. So I particularly caught the new deputy administrator. He was pleased to hear that. You just mentioned hurricanes. Brad spent time talking about the role of PSTA in helping the community respond to the Hurricanes Helene and Milton last year. And Brad, I saw out of my neighborhood in San Key, I saw your buses were responding to a urgent crisis yesterday out in San Key to help evacuate people from a building that had to be a condominium building, had to be shut down out there. So I saw you helping to take some of those folks out safely there. So thank you for that. But it was a good meeting with FTA. We talked about FTA or PSTA getting more involved in ferry boat activities, particularly the Cross Bay Ferry. The new deputy administrator indicated interest he'd like to travel and come to Florida, so Brad's inviting him to come down to take a look at some of the work that you're doing down there. We also had an opportunity to talk about some of the pending grants and funding that has not been released yet. They told us in the meeting that FTA was working through those as fast as possible, and we'll talk in a minute about some good news you all received yesterday on that front. So I thought, Brad, the meeting at FTA and USDOT was a great meeting. I think it really laid the groundwork with the new administration, what you're trying to do. We also had the opportunity to meet with Congresswoman Castor and Luna, talk to them about your congressional funding request to support ferry infrastructure for Rep. Castor in downtown St. Petersburg, and then for Rep. Luna in Dunedin for the ferry system. And they were both quite enthusiastic about that, and I think we've gotten good feedback that your request will be submitted to the full appropriations committee later this month. So that's great news. Thank you, Brad, to your team for pulling all those documents together. So that was great. Brad and Debbie also met with the professional staff for the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, both Republican and Democrat staff. Really good conversation there, particularly about the taxi cab exemption and the work that we're doing on that front. Got, I think, a pretty good response. So a lot of it was just educating them on the issue, and a lot of good questions were asked. And we, on Wednesday, we met with the bipartisan staff, the Republican and Democrat staff for the Senate Banking Committee, which on the Senate side actually oversees the transit program. So I had 4 members of the professional staff there, great meeting, good conversation about a variety of subjects, including the taxi cab exemption. So I think Brad laid a lot of good groundwork on that. We also went over to meet with Senator Moody's, some of her new staff to remind them about PSTA. Fortunately, the legislative director who we met with came over from Senator Rubio's office, so he was already familiar with PSTA. He was quite interested, I think, in Brad and the emergency work that you've done and helping with the evacuation and getting people back to their homes after the hurricanes. He grew up in Fort Myers, so I think that resonated with him. And then we also had a meeting with the Uber leadership, their government affairs leadership here in Washington, to talk about how you all can work together on the taxi cab exemption and how to proceed there. The other thing we learned from the committee staff was that there was a portal open and they were soliciting ideas from PSTA on things they should be considering in the next authorization bill for the highway and surface transportation and transit programs, which Congress will take up next year. But they're looking for suggestions this year to start deciding what to put in that new legislation. This will be the replacement legislation for the bipartisan infrastructure bill that was passed 5 years ago. It'll set policy, transportation policy for the next 5 years. So it's a really important bill. And I think it was good, Brad, that you were on the ground floor of those discussions and that you all were able to submit a couple of ideas, including the taxi cab exemption to the committee. So it was a really good trip. I think Brad and Debbie did an outstanding job. It was good to get out, I think, Brad, get out ahead of the APTA conference when you all are up here later this month. Everybody, all the transit agencies from all over the country are here at the same time, all trying to see the same people. So I think, Brad, was a good strategy to get out ahead of that a little bit and to be able to talk about your issues without so many other transit folks in town. So that was the good news there. I mentioned that one of the things we talked about with FTA and Department of Transportation was the release of federal funding that's been, as they used the word paused, not frozen, but paused, for the new administration to conduct a review of pending grants and contracts. They mentioned that there were 3,200 at the Department of Transportation, 3,200 grant agreements or projects that were in various phases of review, including 1,000 that had been approved to be awarded post-election but pre-inauguration. So the Department of Transportation is undergoing a lot of work, and they told us in the meeting that they were working through those. And I think, Brad, you had indication already prior to that meeting that your grants were moving. But then yesterday we received word that the Department of Transportation had released funding for 180 of those grants were under review, including 2 for PSTA. One is your low-no emission grant program for $27.8 million, one of the largest awards in the country, and I think the second largest award in the state of Florida. And they also released $1 million for your smart project, smart technology project to encourage automatic verification for your seniors and your veterans and your other low cost and free riders. So that's good news that the funds have been released. I think, Brad, maybe your meetings there help spur that along. So good job. And then also last week, had a couple things develop related to the budget. As you may be tracking, there are a couple things happening simultaneously here in Congress. One of them is the House is working through the process called budget reconciliation. We could spend hours talking about this process, but it's a kind of a streamlined approach for ways in which Congress can make significant spending cuts, add some funding in other areas, and provide for an extension of the 2017 tax cuts and include other tax proposals that the President, members of Congress have proposed. That budget reconciliation part of it, the biggest concern for you all is that each of the committees of the House is directed to come up with a certain level of savings. In the case of the Transportation Committee, they've been directed to find $10 billion in savings over the next 8 years. And so the committees are meeting individually to decide how to hit those targets. Fortunately, the transportation, none of them impacted transit programs. It didn't impact Lono, didn't impact a SMART program, didn't impact bus and bus facilities, didn't impact the capital infrastructure grant program. So that's really good news, I think, that those were not programs that were on the chopping block. They added money in their bill for FAA operations and air traffic controllers. They added money for supply chain initiatives. They added money for shipbuilding and port infrastructure. But again, they took no funding cuts for the Department of Transportation. And then subsequent to that, the House, the President sent to Congress what they call a skinny budget, which is kind of the Cliff Notes version of his budget request. It pretty much provides the top lines for each of the departments and agencies, and talked about some places where they want to seek significant savings. Again, that skinny budget did not include any recommendations to cut any transit programs. So that was, I think, really a good indication that this administration, I think, is going to be supportive and probably more supportive than we expected of federal transit programs. In fact, I think, Brad, during some of our meetings with House and Senate committee staff, we got a really good feel on both the Republican and Democrat side. Really excited about the nominee for the FTA administrator position, Mark Molinaro. There's a strong vote out of the banking committee for his approval, and just waiting for floor time to confirm him. So I think they're really excited on both sides of the aisle to support him. Final last thing I'll add is we had a meeting last week. The Department of Transportation calls us in periodically to give us updates on developments and things that they're working on over there. And they spent some time talking to us about Secretary of Transportation Duffy's priorities for his administration over at DOT. And Brad, we heard some of these, I think, in our meeting at FTA. His priorities are safety, innovation, and part of innovation using technology in projects. I think the Smart Grant Award is a great example of how you're using innovation there. They referred again to the issue of providing more transportation opportunities for families. We're not exactly sure, they still haven't quite defined how families and birth rates are going to play in, but he continues to mention that as a priority for him. And they also talk about wanting to support projects where the sponsors are ready to turn dirt quickly, where they're ready to, they want to plan, they want to build. So they want to get things started and finished and try and get through the permitting and the environmental review and all the processes as quickly as possible so you can build projects. So they re-emphasize that they're rolling through all of the grant approvals as fast as they can, so that was a good sign. And they mentioned that they will be opening the notices of funding opportunities for various DOT grant programs throughout the summer. They reduced, they released 3 or 4 NOFOs last week, but Brad, we expect the Lono bus and bus facilities NOFO to come out sometime in late June or early July. So I think it was really a good week. I think it was a positive week on the federal front for the future of transit programs in this administration. And Brad and Debbie did a really good job, I think, on the Hill and down at the agencies. So happy to answer any questions, Brad, or talk about anything I may have left out.
Thanks, Harry. Brad, you want to add anything to that?
Well, yeah, thank you, Harry. You said a lot, and it's hard for even me to keep track of it, but I'm trying. So, as Harry said, like, you know, the whole funding and the budget up in the federal government is different than in Tallahassee and even locally, where Congress typically passes like 5 or 6 year long bills called authorization bills, like for the Department of Transportation, and that governs all the policies and funding levels, maximum funding levels, and then so that bill, that authorization bill for transportation expires in a year, October of 26, it expires. Now Congress has never, in the history of my life, passed an authorization bill on time. They just constantly extend them. And extend them. So, but the current bill was approved. The bipartisan infrastructure bill expires next September of 26. Okay, Congress is already starting to work on that. Work on what policies they want to put into that new policy, sort of top-line funding bill, that's in play. And then there's the appropriations, there's the annual budget that is starting now also. While we were up there, last week, we learned of this, the authorization process has started. I think both House and Senate are doing different sessions to start planning a year and a half ahead of the deadline to for that authorization bill that's due next fall. APTA and all the other associations like the roads and the boats and the ferries and the National League of Cities and all those, they're all starting to work on their recommendations in the transportation space for the authorization bill that's next fall, with at least APTAs, and I think most of them are trying to get their packages through their associations done by this fall, by a year ahead. And again, there's probably most lobbyists, I think, thinks that Congress will not be able to get it done on time, and there'll be extension, it won't happen in September 26th anyway, but they're trying to get their own packages and priorities put together by this fall. Then, when we were there, Chairman Graves of the Transportation Committee in the House, he doesn't want to wait that long because he will be out of chairmanship time. So he has created this earlier deadline. I'm not sure when it is, but he wants to have the House vote on a package like this year during his time. So he has created these different portals. He created a portal for what they called stakeholders that ended on April 30th. And stakeholders could say anything they wanted. It was like a wish list of anything they wanted. And so Debbie and I, in the hotel lobby, we submitted PSDA's submission, which we didn't deviate from the
Right.
priorities. We submitted the TNC, Lono, ferry. Debbie might be able to look it up, like just the things we talked about. And we turned that in on April 30th. I know like Uber turned in something to the portal, APTA turned in something to the portal. I don't know, other transit agencies turned in things to the portal.
Do you know if Ford Pinellas did, or would that not be
They could have.
appropriate?
I don't know if they did. We'll find out. Then, immediately after that portal closed, May 1st to May 31st, is a second portal that has opened, which is for congressional members. And Congresswoman Castor, at least, maybe even Congressman Luna would do this, but Congresswoman Castor said that she would be interested in submitting our issues in during this time when she can turn in things into the portal. Do you have the list?
I do. Did you want to finish what you were
Well,
gonna
yeah,
say?
so we're gonna also send some draft comments for Congressman Castor, and we'll send it to Congresswoman Luna too, to when they turn in their comments to the portal now, that they can do that too. Go ahead.
I have to say, when I was rereading it the other day, I was like, we did a good job.
While you were sitting in the hotel lobby during.
Right, we did a great job.
I
So
love it.
we included support for increased levels of bus and bus facility funding for consumer choice of bus propulsion types.
Right,
FTA emergency relief funding,
yes.
emergencies. Support for FTA and FHWA ferry funding. And allowing for incredibly popular partnerships with the TNCs, you mentioned that. And I think nope, that wasn't it. Allowing TNC supplemental rides to be counted towards the National
Right.
Transit Database, submitted ridership and therefore count in the 5307 formula funding allocations. What that means is the more rides and more information we can provide into the National Transit Database, the more money that'll come to the region. And we just got our apportionments for the urbanized area. We haven't done the splits yet. But overall, from 24 to 25, the money that we get based on formulas increased by slightly over $2 million for the whole region. So that was good news.
Yeah. Anyway, that whole effort with these portals and the chairman, the transportation committee, who knows where that will go? I mean, that is just the House putting
Yeah.
together their ideas, and maybe they'll be successful, maybe not. Doesn't seem like the Senate is really on the same time path. Maybe Harry can correct me on that, but I thought it was good, and I think it's important to get just all the items that PSDA cares about in there. Otherwise, they will be accused of no one cares about them, and they will possibly be, nixed. So I was glad that we were able to do that. Just one final thing on the taxi cab exemption issue. So that is, the Biden administration approved a regulation that would get rid of all of our good programs on December 30th, right at the very end of their administration. The Trump administration has banned any regulations from taking effect, so it hasn't taken effect. It's kind of just sitting out there, and nobody's doing anything about it. And we've been told that nobody will do anything about it till this summer sometime. So when we were in DC and meeting with Uber, we were kind of switching gears to fighting it within the FTA to having Congress maybe approve language in the next authorization that would recognize that TNCs exist and they basically take the place of taxis. And that they can be utilized for services like PSA operates. So that's the approach that seems to be emerging, is to just try to have Congress provide legislation on this. That's a little bit of a longer game, while hopes that the current administration will not implement some kind of new rule that would put us out of business with the TNCs in the short term. I think that's basically the goal. And that's why Uber submitted stuff to the portal. They submitted basically the same thing we submitted, some suggestions that they can still exist. I just wanna, that's the latest on the TNC thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm surprised that you guys didn't mention the ferry dock, because our understanding on the city of St. Petersburg side for the ferry dock at the pier was that you guys were taking that as a request,
We are.
because you had room, you had,
Yes, we submitted the ferry, that ferry dock
okay,
to Congresswoman Castor, and she
Okay.
is supportive of it, and the city wrote us letters of support. City is supporting us on that
yes, okay.
earmark request.
You hadn't
yeah.
mentioned it, so I wanted to make sure.
Yes, Harry
Yeah,
mentioned,
yes.
we submitted to Congresswoman Castor and talked to her about it for St. Petersburg ferry, and then when we talked to Congresswoman Luna, she's agreed to put in funding for the Dunedin ferry dock.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah, Madam Chair, the timing was really good for Brad and Debbie to be there last week because the portals to submit those appropriations requests just closed, and the members of the House had to submit their 15, each member gets to submit 15 funding requests to the Appropriations Committee. Their deadline is at the end of this week, so the timing is really good as they were thinking about what their priorities were gonna be. Brad and Debbie were there talking about, to Congresswoman Castor and Luna, the ferry program and why those are so important and the need for the infrastructure. So the timing was good. I think we got positive feedback that both those projects will be on the two members' list of 15 projects.
That's great, and this blends really nicely with the last couple of Zoom meetings I've had with National League of Cities for the Transportation Infrastructure Services Committee that I'm on.
Yeah.
Talked about a lot of the same things, and so that's how I learned about the new portal that's open for this month. And I wanted to add that the requests are unlimited, like as far as the suggestions that you wanna make, it's not just 5 or whatever. You can put in 25 if you want, although I would not.
Well, Debbie and I were kinda hungry to go to dinner, and so we only put in, the website has 5, and then you have to do a whole new application for your next 5, so we just did 5.
Well, sometimes less is more, so. And then also it's for projects and policies. So basically, all ideas are welcome. Next week, so the priorities that the NLC committee has, that they're sharing with members are, of course, it's for transportation overall, so not all of it is like transit related, but they are asking for an increase in the surface transportation block grant program because it's the most flexible one.
Yeah.
And to deliver more formula funds directly to our regional transportation organizations. Having that go more directly so that it can be more easily delivered to cities and to our region. Keeping local access to programs for safe streets, rail crossings, local bridges, and innovation. And streamlining the environmental process for smaller projects and building and rebuilding projects. And then lowering the cost of transportation safety and innovation by setting up experimentation and innovation funds for basics like signal crossings, but also emerging advanced transportation options. So I just wanted to share that with you so that you know what that particular organization is advocating for. And a lot of that is, it goes along with things that we do here, things that we do on Fort Pinellas. I like how it's, the messaging is so similar. And there's a lot of good crossover there.
Do you know if the National League of Cities, they probably turned in something into the portal first, the one that already ended?
Yes,
Themselves.
I don't have that in front of me, but I can find out what they put in.
Yeah, okay.
And then next week is National Infrastructure Week. So
I didn't know.
any of our transportation infrastructure projects that are completed that we can point to, or stuff that is projects that are in the works or in progress, any of that you can highlight next week could get the attention of, you can make sure it bubbles up to people on the Hill. So,
We definitely will, yes. As Harry said, our meetings were really good. They were very interested in some of our different projects, how we came in under budget with the Sunrunner, for sure. That was a big hit. The Smart Grant project to make it easier for veterans and seniors to get their discounted passes.
mhm.
Hey,
We'll
Brad,
definitely
Madam Chair, can I add a couple things to that? First of all, I forgot, Brad, in addition to a list of kudos, the new deputy administrator was particularly interested in PSTA's leadership in allowing transit agencies across the state, and I guess anywhere in the country, Brad, that wants to buy buses off the schedule that PSTA led the negotiations on for this last cycle. So they're really excited to hear that PSTA was taking the lead on helping transit agencies procure buses more cost effectively. So I thought that was another good feather in the cap for PSTA. Two other things, Madam Chair, since you were talking about transportation initiatives in general, Brad and I and Debbie heard about this from our meetings. In the reconciliation package, you may have read that one of the revenue generating things that they did in the transportation side was to create a new $250 annual fee for people who buy electric cars, and $100 fee these are annual fees for hybrid car vehicles. Those fees are going to be collected if this bill becomes law. The issue here, though, was interesting because typically, as you know, gas tax revenue is split 80-20, 80% towards the highway fund and 20% towards transit programs. It's the way it's always been. And these additional fees are now going to be levied on these new classes of vehicles because they're not paying gas taxes. That's to help close the deficit that's been created in the highway trust fund. And for the first time, these two fees for electric vehicles and hybrid vehicles, 100% of the fee collection will go into the highway trust fund, and none of that will go into the transit fund. So I know, Brad, we heard from some of the committee staff concern about, particularly on the Democrat side, that was a problem. And I think the Democrats in the House are gonna try and push back and see if they can't, before the bill becomes law, try and restore the 80-20 cut there. So Chair Driscoll, that may be something else you wanna take a look at if that's something that's of interest. The second thing, in the meeting at the Department of Transportation last week, where they were talking about the Secretary's initiatives, one of the other things that he's focused on is they may be, and they haven't decided how they're gonna do this, they may give bonus points to projects in states where they are, or what they call NEPA assignment states. This is a process that was created under 2 highway bills ago called Safety Lou that allowed states to apply to oversee the NEPA process for transportation projects in their state, rather than having the federal government oversee the NEPA process for various federal projects. The states would be assigned that responsibility. Florida has accepted that responsibility, and they're one of 7 states in the country that have that responsibility right now. So it may be something, Brad, that is helpful in future projects as you're applying for things that you're working on that Florida is a NEPA assignment state. So you may get, potentially in this administration, get some additional bonus points for that. So something else, Chair Driscoll, that will benefit, I think, other local transportation projects going forward.
Yeah, you know, another way they could do it, it's gonna still be 80-20, except that 100% of the EV fees would go to highways.
Correct.
So instead of just insisting on it being 80-20, say, fine, then let's have it be 70-30. And then 100% of the EV charges can still go. I mean, I don't know what the math, I'd have to look at numbers, but they can either stick to 80-20 across the board, or, you know, play with those percentages so that transit is still getting something, you know? Like if somebody's insisting on 100% of it, that going to highways. I'm just kind of thinking out loud here.
Well, yeah, I mean, the highway fund and the transit fund are funded by gas taxes
Right.
that have not been increased since 1982, since Ronald Reagan. That's what funds those are allocated 80-20, 80% highways, 20% transit. And then there's been nothing added to that since 1982. This is the first time that there's a proposal to charge these fees to electric cars. And then we learned when we were up there, and I think it was kind of new news, that they had decided not to allocate that 80-20. That will be just on the top, go into the highway side. And I don't know if there's they always talk about the year or the date in which the highway trust fund will go bankrupt or the transit trust fund will go bankrupt. And those are always out there and threatening, like, run out of money, and they won't be able to give any more money because the gas taxes are going down across the country. Gas tax, because people are getting electric cars or more efficient, fuel efficient cars, there's less fuel, so the gas taxes are going down, and so that's why there's this threat. So they're gonna plus that up to get that solvent, but then the transit account's gonna go down.
Right,
Yeah.
right, which is why changing the percentage could make things a little bit more even.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if they would be
Or
open
two.
to changing the gas tax percentage to be higher and let the electrics go into the, I have no idea what the politics are behind all that.
Okay, I have a question. Harry, I hesitate to even bring this up, but what about some of the policy and politics about Florida being a donor state?
I mean, that's, they closed the gap. I mean, Florida used to be a bigger donor state than they are. I think 2 or 3 highway bills ago, there were some tweaks made to the system where Florida, I think at one point Florida, if I recall, Florida was sending out only getting back 80% on the dollar for the gas tax revenue that they were paying in. I think that has closed. I haven't seen the latest percentages, but I know it was in the 90s. So Florida has done a good job catching up. It's not all the way there yet.
Okay.
You know, that's always, we've got some senior members now on the transportation committee. That is something that, you know, you could talk to the members of the Florida delegation about trying to find ways to close that gap even more. It's always a dicey proposition because then you're looking at other states, New York and others, where they're receiving more than they contribute to the highway trust fund. So, you know, if you take if you add $1 to Florida, you take $1 away from somewhere else, it gets to be a little tricky, but it's certainly something worth having a conversation with the Florida delegation about, as this bill is being developed.
Thanks.
Do you have any questions?
I was listening.
Interesting.
Yeah,
Yes, Brad.
The one final thing just to highlight is in 10 days, we'll be going back to Washington DC with a group of us. And Commissioner Walker, who is not zooming in yet, is gonna join us as well. And so that will be the after legislative conference, and they have a growing number of people that are coming to the hotel to speak. Senator Warren,
Yes.
who's the chair of the banking ranking member on the banking committee, and Secretary Duffy I saw, and Chairman Graves is coming,
And Chuck Todd.
and Chuck Todd. Oh, I didn't know. Great. But Harry, we can connect and try to come up with some meetings that we can do when we're up there again.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe see if we can talk to Congresswoman Castor again about her submission to the portal. That might be good.
And that might be something, I mean, I don't know about other Pinellas cities, what they might be doing, but it could be good to try to coordinate or at least touch base with David Thompson for St. Petersburg to
Yeah.
see what we're working on our side. I have not had an opportunity to talk with him about that. However, I'm in the process of setting up a meeting with him along with Evan Morey in advance of the DC trip so that I understand the St. Pete side of it. Like the very latest. With the way that things are changing
I know.
so much, I told them I want to meet with you right before I go.
I know. Me too.
Cheryl Stacks had sent me an update a few weeks ago before one of my NLC meetings. And I'm like, oh, that was 3 weeks ago. I better ask her just to pull that email and update it for me because new rules all the time and I always want to know the status of the grants that we've been awarded that we're still waiting to find out about. So.
Yeah, exactly.
Harry, who is which staffer from Rubio's office is working for Moody now? Is it Connor?
Connor Tomlinson, yes.
Yeah, he's great. I really like him a lot. I'm glad to hear that he landed there. Good.
Yeah.
Did you have anything else for us today, Harry?
I don't think so. Good, I just want to say thanks again to Brian and Debbie. We were on the move for 3 days, but they did a great job.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, I'll bring my walking shoes too, and I'll see you soon. All right, thanks, everybody. Do we have any other business for today?
Well, we have the PSCA one
We
page.
had some 2 action items, but we don't have a quorum, so
Right, so are those both items that can be deferred to?
yes, so the ferry
Did you-
presentation, we were planning on also presenting for the executive committee, so we might as well just
Oh,
go.
well, you
Now
know
that
what,
we-
we're just gonna stay seated then.
Yeah, right, exactly.
So
Yeah,
Deborah and I don't have to see you twice.
Yeah.
Yep. All right, so we'll have our next meeting on June 4th, 2025 at 9 a.m. Seeing that there is no other business, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Harry.
Thank you.
Bye, Harry.
I did pass this out, this is just what we took around on the Uber and